Welcome to the Numerology Podcast. I'm your host, Novalee Wilder. I'm a professional numerologist and writer. And in this podcast, we're just going to nerd out, which means we're going to talk names, we're going to talk numbers, numerology, astrology, connections between the different esoteric fields, case studies, and so much more. Today's episode is a little bit special. This episode is about what to do when someone you love changes their name. I got this idea from one of my wonderful clients. She asked me recently if I'd ever written a guide on how to navigate someone else's name change. I think she meant something that she could give to her husband or a friend to make it easier for the other person to deal with what she was going through. And I haven't created anything like that, so I'm doing that today. This is something you could share with people leading up to or after your own name change. Or if you're following this podcast or anything else I do because someone in your life has changed their name, or, there's just a curiosity about numerology and if there's a name change on the cards, like how that will feel, people's expectations. Yeah, this will just help you support someone else, maybe even yourself, and also understand what's going on. It's also kind of helpful to see common pitfalls so you can avoid them. So first off, someone else's name change is not a reaction to you in any way. Please don't take it personally. No matter what prompts a name change, it's kind of a profound and transformational thing to do. This is not some superficial adjustment, and whether or not someone shares their motivation for changing their name, please don't dismiss this choice as something silly, frivolous, trendy, thoughtless, or random. There's something about change that can be triggering. When someone close to us does something big, we can react negatively. We sometimes attack when we feel uncomfortable or unsafe. Please, if you talk to a person who's changed their name or done any kind of big transformational thing, try to refrain from statements like, "Oh, to me, you'll always be, whatever, old name or old thing," and "Oh, I'll never be able to remember this new name," and "Oh, you always make these crazy and weird decisions," and "Why would you turn your back on your name or your history or your past? Don't you want to be part of this family or community anymore? Oh, your name was chosen by your parents. You should be grateful." And please don't ever link someone's new name that they're probably really excited about and also sensitive about to something that could be hurtful, like, "That sounds like a stripper name," or "That sounds like," insert blank hurtful statement. And I also want to say there's nothing wrong with choosing the vocation of being a stripper. It's sometimes we just throw out certain statements to make fun of or degrade or ridicule someone else's choice without thinking through that we actually, it's a double-edged sword. We show our own bias in the process of it. Don't do that. Try to refrain for that. And if you do, catch yourself. Don't make a huge deal of someone's new name or some kind of change unless you want to celebrate it. So if you forget or mess up a new name, don't beat yourself up. Just try again. It can also be triggering for the person who has made the big transformation or done something and is really okay with it, that someone around them is like, "Oh, this is so hard." And they say that repeatedly. There might be a pattern that you are doing that someone else's transformation can shine a light on. Adjust the new name in your contacts, your email, your phone. If they've changed it on Facebook or anywhere like that, make sure that their posts are shown in your feed so your brain can get used to seeing this new name. Over time, you will probably feel, unless it's your a very close family member, that you won't even remember the old name. I have had that experience where people are like, "What did you used to be called?" I don't even remember anymore. If you're curious about why someone is changing their name or have done anything like that, you can ask in a very gentle, open-ended way. Some people love to share their reasons. For others, it's a much more personal and intimate journey. And no one owes anyone an explanation for a choice like this. So if you get a brush off or someone says "I want to discuss this," just respect that. Now, if you live or spend a lot of time in Northern Europe, then you know the law of Jente. I'll even put a link in the show notes for this. And this will kind of have shaped how you instinctively react to anyone who steps out of the societal norms. We also know this syndrome or this law or this reality that people are living in as the tall poppy syndrome. I think it's mentioned like that in Australia, New Zealand, Holland, and Ireland. It works as a kind of leveling mechanism. It makes us unkind to certain forms of individuality, some certain forms of expression. And when we see it in others, and of course it gets internalized, and we see it in ourselves. If someone's name change triggers this kind of unkindness in you, it could be time to allow yourself to express your own beautiful uniqueness and success. Now let's get a little more nitty-gritty here. On a spiritual level, I see all name changes as a way to course correct the path we're on. As our names are a vibrational fit to the reality we're living right now, a name change will adjust everything in our field to this new vibration of this new name. Someone who changes their name legally with the help of a numerologist goes through like a 6 to 12 month period that we call the release. Capital T, capital R. The release. This period is characterized by a deepened sensitivity. There is a period of where we clear out old, stagnant mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual patterns. There is a period of integration, new mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual opportunities and thoughts. There is adjustment in boundaries, in relationships. Often there's an expansion of creative and spiritual curiosity. And we also get more open to the global energies. So if you ever feel like, Mercury retrograde, for example, is kind of hard, if you go through a name change and the period after that, you will probably feel that Mercury retrograde a little harder because we open ourselves and our energy field in the transformation and the process between one name and the next. So the release is a period of feeling all the feelings and also kind of getting reacquainted with the core of who we are. This means that old wounds show up and we uncover more of the inherent gifts and strengths of our birthday. In numerology, that's our base numbers. So a harmonious numeroscope, which is made from balanced name vibrations, that's given by a professional numerologist, kind of clears the way to integrate lost and suppressed parts of ourselves. And this often shows up in our close relationships and our sense of self-worth. Some of my clients have spent way too much time living through other people's emotional lives. And they've blurred the lines of personal responsibility and maturity. And during the release, they kind of retreat and regroup. This means for their family and close friends that a certain ingrained interpersonal pattern can't be played out. So you might get triggered if someone is pulling away during your release. And this goes both ways. If you're going through your own release, you might get super triggered by certain people and feel like, oh my God, is this happening again? What is this pattern? I thought it was going to get better. And the note here is just let the drama unfold. You don't have to engage. If you are on the outside or if you are having someone in your life who are going through the motions of the release and it triggers you that they are suddenly less available, please know that this doesn't mean that there is no love or connection, but there might need to be a shift. This relationship and this connection might be more sustainable and healthy for everyone involved if it shifts to a less dysfunctional pattern. And there's no judgment here. Sometimes things just need to shift because if we've been living a little bit too much over in other people, then we need to come back to ourselves. And the release often means big emotional variables. We feel more, we connect deeper, we often become more expressive. As layers of conditioning get cleared, some of the more childlike qualities in our personality can show up. We sometimes even look younger. It's if someone you love is going through big emotional shifts during their release, and this triggers something in you. Please just allow yourself and this other person a bit of space. Big emotions are part of being human. Expressing them is healthy, as long as everyone's boundaries are respected. So if something in you equates big emotions with some form of unsafety, there might be a personal pattern for you to look into. Because keeping each other small, whether it be expressively or financially or emotionally or the sense of like safety, if we only operate within a very limited spectrum, is actually detrimental for everyone in that spectrum. We do need to feel some of the edges of our emotional life sometime. People who change their name through numerology, they get more access to their own heart and intuition. And this often leads to adjustments in their career, personal interests, and goals. They might rekindle some lost creative flame. And for the people around them, this can lead to this fear of being left behind. Like, all these things are changing, you're moving so fast, where do I fit in? And you can totally share these thoughts, and you can share these feelings, as long as you don't make it their job to solve the challenge for you. Because if you get triggered, then that's your trigger, and they might not share it, and it might be a gift. The glue that holds a family or a relationship together is love, respect, and acceptance of each other's differences, worldviews, and free will. It's not a last name, it's not doing everything the same way or the same way as we did it yesterday. And someone else's transformation, it's often a gift in disguise for everyone around them. Trust that this name change and these decisions are right for this person. If it triggers, and I'm going to use this word like a million times in this episode, but if it triggers things in you, that's okay. You get a chance to look at why someone else's decisions influences you in that way. Because many of these thoughts and these tips and these triggers extend to other choices, other changes, other adjustments that people make throughout their life. On a global level, life is really speeding up. People go through multiple careers. They move around the world. They try out way different forms of lifestyle and personal expression than our parents or our grandparents or, beyond that. Life is speeding up, and this is a good thing. And change and transformation are beautiful experiences. So if a name change is not for you, that's okay. The fact that someone else makes this choice can push you into allowing a change in areas of your life that you might think are unmovable or unchangeable or untouchable. Very few things are solid. The only constant is change. And when we are afraid of change, we will get triggered by it. So to sum up this thing, if you get triggered, look at your triggers and make space for the person who is actually doing the work for you. And if you want to know more about this, and if the whole idea about like having a release and something happens after a name change and how to make sense of all of this, you can go to my website, novaleewilder.com/blog, and find a short series. I have written blogs about the phases of a name change, because there is more than just a release. And it happens even before you book a session or like really go into like, oh, how do I do it if I want to change my name? And please share this episode. If you know anyone, it might not even have to be numerology or name change related, but just someone who needs a little input on how to go about when people make big changes in their life. And I want to add something. This is the end of this episode. I want to add something. I've noticed that the intense media coverage of the Black Lives Matter movement has kind of died down a little bit. And I feel like it's important, if you are an ally and if you want to help and if you want to educate yourself, that you find ways of doing that might not be monetary or reading news and getting depressed about nothing happening. And I want to recommend a podcast by Trudy and Weeze that's called That's Not How That Works. And it's an exploration of diversity and inclusion and equity and how they show up or don't show up in our personal and professional communities. Weeze and Trudy are really, really knowledgeable and good and interesting to listen to, and I really, really recommend it. And you can find the podcast on Apple Podcasts or everywhere else, and it's called That's Not How That Works. If you like this episode of the Numerology Podcast, please don't forget to write a review, follow us, subscribe. You can also find me on all the different social media platforms. That means that creative and colorful imagery goes along with all these messages that I'm sharing. And that's all for this episode. See you in the next one.